Hello, everyone. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. My name is Randy Bell, and I'm the director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation about the future of hydrogen and the possibility for transatlantic cooperation on a clean energy recovery. We have a phenomenal panel of policymakers and business leaders who are at the forefront of building the future hydrogen economy. I can't wait to hear from them, but before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. First, this event is on the record, and we are currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and the video will be available shortly after the event on these platforms. You can follow the event on Twitter at AC Global Energy, and you use the hashtag AC Energy. If you'd like to participate in the conversation and ask a question, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A portal in Zoom located at the bottom of your Zoom screen anytime during the event, and I'll get to as many of these as I can. If you're watching on another platform like YouTube or Twitter, unfortunately, we cannot take your questions. I want to give a huge thanks to our partner in organizing this event, the Hydrogen Council. For those of you who don't know the Hydrogen Council, they are a CEO-led coalition working to enable the global energy transition through hydrogen. Two of our panelists today, Christian Bruch from Siemens Energy and Tom Linebarger from Cummins, are both very active members. Created just 3 years ago, the Hydrogen Council now brings together CEOs from over 80 global companies, a testament to the soaring interest in hydrogen we've all seen recently. And it provides guidance on accelerating the deployment of hydrogen solutions globally and promoting collaboration between governments, industry, investors, and civil society. We could not have put this event together without them. So let's get started. The goal of the conversation today is to understand how the transatlantic community can work together to advance hydrogen technology and achieve carbon neutrality. We will discuss the policies that are needed to get there, and perhaps of more immediate concern, what role the hydrogen revolution can play in spurring economic and job growth as nations recover from the current COVID crisis. To address these questions and more, we have with us on the Zoom line 4 individuals at the forefront of the future of hydrogen. As I mentioned earlier, our 2 Hydrogen Council CEOs are Christian Bruch, President and CEO at Siemens Energy, and Tom Linebarger, Chairman and CEO of Cummins. And then from government, we have 2 key people responsible for developing hydrogen policy. Paula Abro-Marquez, Head of Unit for Renewables and CCS Policy at the European Commission Directorate General for Energy, and Michael Berube, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Transportation at the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. It's really a really phenomenal group, and I think we're all going to learn a whole lot. So we're going to start the first question with Paula, given the EU's really bold recent announcements on hydrogen. So Paula, can you tell me about the EU's strategy on hydrogen, its role in the Green Deal, and why hydrogen is important for the recovery?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's a great pleasure to join this event today on behalf of the European Commission, an event on hydrogen and addressing the transatlantic opportunity for a clean energy recovery. We see that not only in Europe, but globally, hydrogen is monopolizing the attention of our energy decision makers. The European Commission has recently put on the table an important strategy, the hydrogen strategy, together with other important documents that I will briefly refer to. And I'm very pleased to have been involved, to have coordinated the preparation of these documents inside the Commission. So on the 8th of July, the European Commission presented its vision for the energy sector in the strategy for energy system integration. These have been already announced as part of one of the actions to deliver on the European Green Deal. And why? In order to deliver on carbon neutrality, as you know, this is the EU intention in the long term to reach carbon neutrality, and that it is made in a cost-efficient way, we need to address the energy system in a much more integrated way, exploring the benefits of the interrelations between supplies, carriers, demand factors, the whole value chains. unlike what we have today or what we have known until now, which is basically a model built around rigid, isolated value chains. And this strategy, the energy system integration, has three main pillars. And these three pillars are then supported by a series of transversal enablers like financing, like establishing the enabling market rules, infrastructure development, R&I, and also digitalization. The three pillars are a more efficient and circular energy, making investment decisions also subject to a test to see the so-called energy efficiency first principle, if they correspond to that, and also trying to reutilize all major waste streams that come up. Second pillar relates to enhanced use of electrification. So electrification is the easiest, the cheapest, the fastest way of decarbonizing the energy sector. It is expected that in the EU will double the rate of electrification of our consumption to reach 50% in 2050. And that this will be based for greatest part up to 85% sourced from renewable energy. So we'll go electric. However, as we all know, electrification is not a solution, is not possible, or it is too costly for some types of consumptions. And we think here of the heavy industry, energy-intensive industry, like in the transport sector. And so we will need renewable energy gases and fuels like hydrogen, but also like biofuels, biogas, as we gradually will move out natural gas. So. In terms of, if I may say so, the hydrogen strategy is the kind was presented together with the system integration because they are interrelated. Hydrogen can almost be seen as a spin-off of the system integration strategy. And in this one, the Commission indicates how it sees the upscaling of the demand and supply of renewable hydrogen. So to create a market, how to mobilize the member states, the deployment in industry, how to advance the necessary regulatory framework, how to strengthen the research agenda, and how to support stronger international cooperation. It is clear in our strategy that the long-term focus is renewable hydrogen, because it has the biggest added value for the EU case. It is emission-free, help to manage our electricity system. We have leadership in electrolyzers, and several analyses expect that renewable hydrogen will become competitive with fossil-based hydrogen already by 2030. But of course, the strategy equally recognizes that in a transitional period, other forms of low-carbon hydrogen are needed. And primarily, if you want to tackle quickly the reduction of emissions from existing hydrogen production, that in Europe, existing hydrogen production is basically fossil-based, and also to support the deployment and uptake of renewable hydrogen. So our priority is renewable hydrogen. We see interesting uses of this hydrogen. It offers a unique pathway to address the difficult to abate sectors, so in industry, heavy-duty transports, where we see alternatives that are scarce, non-existent, or extremely expensive. Apart from that, also renewable hydrogen has also enables to energy system integration, enables integration of large shares of renewables in transport and industry, provides flexibility, can also be a solution for large-scale storage, among many others. So it is really our priority. This strategy comes also with an investment agenda, and this is why it is also set in the context of the recovery efforts of the EU that you may know is being discussed very intensively those days in Brussels by the European leaders. We expect it to bring jobs to Europe and also to help our industry. Together with the strategy, we also launched the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, a stronger collaboration between the member states, industry, and civil society. And the aim of this is really to bring the scale and impact to industrialization efforts. So there is a major investment effort that is required, and we expect the Alliance to help develop an investment pipeline of concrete projects across the whole hydrogen value chain, also making use of available funding instruments. And one last word from me, an importance of this event was, of course, it's also recognized in the strategy. The international collaboration is a big part of our approach, and here it is our wish to expand our long-term collaboration with US through the EU-US Energy Council, also to cover aspects related to the hydrogen. And I expect that I'll be able to address those later on today in this event. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. And I want to come back later on to this question of lowering the carbon footprint of existing hydrogen production. But first, I want to go to your colleague from the United States. Let me turn to Michael. DOE made a really big commitment a few weeks back, $100 million for hydrogen-related research. Could you give us a big picture understanding of the projects, initiatives, and financing included in the newest DOE hydrogen push? What problems do you think that this hydrogen push can solve, both from a technical perspective and perhaps a political perspective? And what are DOE's priorities for hydrogen research in the short and the medium term?
Well, thank you very much for having me and for all joining today. No, definitely want to hit those points. It really builds upon the last 2 decades of very intense R&D work that we've been doing here in the Department of Energy, in the Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy group on hydrogen and fuel cells. And I think if you look at the arc of work in hydrogen and fuel cells, there's been a lot of advanced R&D, and what you're seeing now in the last few years is that R&D has advanced to a point, combined with a market and policy pull, certainly in many parts of the world, to really bring these forces together. So several weeks ago, we announced $100 million initiative using the national labs of the United States, but largely working with industry as well. And this is a key point. We believe there's tremendous power we have in the national lab system to advance R&D, but we also see hydrogen and fuel cells are at the point where collaboration with industry is now really going to propel it forward. If you look at the history of where we were with batteries and electric vehicles, and you go back in time, it's a very similar push. I think government R&D investment can bring it so far, but then you really do need the industry collaboration. The work that we're planning on, really, as we've done a deep dive and look across the entire spectrum, we see 2 key areas, and this really aligns with what Paula said. First, in the transportation sector, the heavy duty, whether that be heavy duty trucking, marine, possibly rail, the challenges are greater there for electrification. We do believe there might be a role for battery electrification, but hydrogen clearly also has a great opportunity there. So that is half the focus. And then the other half really ties in with the role of hydrogen to be an integrating energy source. So we see between very high levels of renewable, as that grows, the need to have increased energy storage and energy carriers, which hydrogen can play a key part of. We see hydrogen production certainly through electrolysis, R&D needed there as well. And then when you combine that, you now have hydrogen that can also be used in new industrial sources. And we think that will also be critical. So while transport is one focus, new industrial sources, that could be backup power for data centers, it could be hydrogen as reducing agent steel production coming in. We call this overall concept H2 at scale. The vision is, in order to make the promise of hydrogen a reality, and it's been a promise, it hasn't quite been a reality yet, we need to get the volume up so you can bring the cost down. And having these multi-sector integrated approach, we think is a key aspect for that.
Michael, thanks so much. And you said that this private sector would be a key partner. So let's turn to the private sector now. We'll go to Christian from Siemens Energy first. So Christian, Siemens has made some very ambitious announcements regarding its goals for hydrogen, particularly with its turbine technology. What role does Siemens Energy plan on playing in the future hydrogen economy?
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me, and also hello everybody on this conference. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Maybe let me briefly introduce, because Siemens Energy is a new company. It's a spin-off of Siemens. It's $30 billion of revenue, 90,000 people, and it comprises really all the energy technology which Siemens has, which today is roughly the base for 20% of the world electricity generation. So in this regard, we take, with regard to hydrogen, 2 distinct roles. The one role is obviously we're trying and we're present in the whole value chain of the hydrogen production. We start off actually on the renewable side with wind power. We are since a couple of decades in the electrolyzers generating hydrogen. And as you said, we have been starting to convert our gas turbine fleet, for example, to convert it to hydrogen. Depending on the model, you can fully take 100% hydrogen in the gas turbines, re-electrify it. And obviously, this is all meant to really find a transition. And this is a second role, what we are trying to take as an industrial company for our customers. We are present along a lot of generation technology, not only hydrogen, but obviously we also have still coal, still nuclear, still gas, and everything in there. And we have a very wide customer range. So for us, one key element at the moment is really how can we help our customers to transition from today, where we have a very diverse setup, to a more sustainable and more renewable future footprint. And this I see as a second task, beside providing the right technologies, but also making sure that we find the right interim steps. Because if you want to move something, and if you want to move something today, then we also have to think about what is the first step I can actually take. I mean, we all would love to be in a completely renewable green hydrogen world, but it doesn't help us and it doesn't help the environment if we debate for the next 10 years around it until we get something done. So what we're trying at the moment is really how can we define these interim steps, maybe based on a gas turbine where you gradually inject hydrogen, maybe adding certain renewable hydrogen production to it. So how can we help our customers who come from a, let me say, conventional world to go now the next steps to come to a sustainable setup? So this is more or less what we are doing at Siemens Energy.
That's fascinating. A follow-on question, since you see hydrogen playing a role, but you also, of course, as you said, have all these other generating assets. What do you see as the fuel mix 10, 20, 30 years from now?
Well, you probably know all the statistics or whatever around what IEA or IHS or whatever you take, right? I mean, and it's probably between the different scenarios, there's one given, right? Renewables will be bigger, no question. Is it now 60%? Is it 50? Is it 70? I don't know, right? Gas, I strongly believe, will still be the backbone to a certain amount. And I also believe coal going to decrease. And amongst this, the biggest change, what I believe you're going to see is the changes in the transmission grids. Because actually it's not just the technology as such, it's the fact that the source of the power and the sink of the power where it's consumed is going to move apart more and more, right? The more we move to renewable energy, this is what we're going to see, which brings some power to X solutions very much to the table. So the only thing I could predict at the moment is really renewable gets more and transmission grids get more challenging. The rest we're going to see on how it works out. I think it would be unrealistic to believe that 10 years from now, so we would be completely renewable. I don't believe this in the time frame. But at the same time, also with a big push from the investor side, we're going to see a big push against coal in particular, and then this will have its consequences.
Right. Thank you. This is really, really fascinating. Finally, want to move on to Tom. Again, the private sector perspective. Cummins has a really long history in diesel power solutions. But so how do you see the role of hydrogen evolving in your product portfolio over the next 10, 20, 30 years? And again, I'll just get ahead of it and ask that same follow-on question, which is, what does this imply about your prediction for the future energy mix for transportation fuels?
Thank you so much, Randy. And thank you for having me on this terrific panel. It's a remarkable group of people, and thank you all for signing in with us. Let me just start by saying, as you mentioned, so Christian's company is a new company, spun out of old. Ours is 100 years old as of last year. So we've been at power innovation for a long time, and we serve a different segment. We are in the power for equipment and transportation and commercial industrial kind of equipment. But we've been trying to innovate in that sector for now 100 years, both diesel, natural gas, and then emissions technologies for those different powertrains. And as of last year, our 100th anniversary, we set a target for zero carbon by 2050, being carbon neutral. In order to meet that target, we obviously need a lot different technologies than we're offering today. And so in that same year, in 2019, we made several significant investments in hydrogen technology as well as electric vehicle powertrain technology. We made investments by acquiring Hydrogenics, one of the leading companies in fuel cells and electrolyzers. We also made investment in the solid oxide fuel cell technology. We made investment in Loop Energy, which also added a partnership in Europe for hydrogen tanks and storage equipment for on mobile technology. So all these investments are meant to recognize the fact that to get to the targets that we've set out, our technologies for powertrains are going to have to evolve significantly over the next decade or two. And as Christian mentioned, there are a lot of challenges, both infrastructure and technology-wise, to making those transitions. But at Cummins, what we feel, I've always felt, is that innovation is at the core of our capabilities. So all of us, although we've been innovating in diesel, are now just as excited and looking forward to innovating in fuel cells and hydrogen technologies, as well as electric powertrains. So we are about the task, and our view is that what we need now is coming together of government and private industry, as you see on this panel, to begin to set in place infrastructure, development, and deployment strategies to really scale up the technology. It's not that fuel cells today are really at the same level of development as diesel. Of course, they're not. They're much younger than that. But they are reaching a place where they are robust enough to serve in commercial and industrial applications. So now what we need to do is do more R&D at a higher rate, deploy at scale so we can bring down costs, and then put infrastructure around it in order to make it useful to industry. And that's really, I think, what the group here is trying to get done, is use this opportunity in time where we clearly need to make major investments. We're trying to come out of a pandemic and an economic downturn. Why not use this opportunity to make investments in the way we want the world to be in the future, as opposed to the way the world was?
Tom, thank you. Just a very quick question, which is, you said that fuel cells are mature enough now to work in certain industrial applications. What are you deploying them in now? And then what do you see in sort of 5-10 years from now? Where are those initial?
Thanks for that question, Randy. So we have, in hydrogenics, we have already deployed 2,000 fuel cells. So this is not a new technology to us. We've been using and deploying now for some time. But what I notice is that we now can put them in applications like trains. We have a partnership with Alstom where we're providing fuel cells for their trains, and they can run those trains with passengers in real situations and be in reliable delivery of passengers and freight on a regular basis. And again, if you'd gone back 10 or 15 years ago, it wasn't that there weren't prototypes and things, but the life, the cost did not make them really practical for use. That is not so anymore. And we can now deploy them in real commercial and transportation uses and count on them to be reliable. There's still more development to do, especially on the cost side, but I think we can now begin to put our imagination to how do we get this out and in scale, as opposed to how do we develop the technology from scratch.
Got it. Thank you. So, Tom, just one final thing. You did win the Zoom background contest. Congratulations on that. Okay, so we want to talk for this event not just about what we're doing right now, but what the opportunities are for transatlantic cooperation on hydrogen. We are the Atlantic Council, after all, and have had a strong history of building transatlantic ties. So what are the opportunities, transatlantic opportunities, that can accelerate hydrogen's deployment? So Paula, to you first, what opportunities for cooperation do you see, both in terms of policy framework exchanges and in terms of technological developments? Paula, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I repeat. It is recognized we recognize in the strategy that in order to move this agenda forward, and as the previous speakers mentioned, to scale it up, absolutely we need also to draw on enhanced international cooperation. And with the growing interest that we see also today on clean hydrogen at the global level, so we recognize the importance of our ties with our partner countries, and also, for instance, to look at solutions related to safety, to harmonize safety and environmental standards, for instance. We also develop a benchmark for the euro-denominated transactions in hydrogen. So we really want to promote the use of and consolidate the use of euro in the trade of sustainable energy, and we use the hydrogen for this as well. We have an interest in placing hydrogen high in the agenda of our structured energy dialogues we have with our key partner countries, starting with the US, but also looking at other countries like Japan or even in North Africa, South Korea, and others. And as I said before, we stand ready to extend our bilateral cooperation using the EU-US Energy Council to address our shared interests in the hydrogen. We also intend to strengthen engagement in the major multilateral initiatives. So not only our relationship with the US on a bilateral basis, but also what we could do together in multilateral platforms related to hydrogen, such as the International Partnership for Hydrogen in the Economy, and also the Hydrogen Initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial. And in particular, specifically addressing cooperation on hydrogen and technological developments, we have been very much engaged in the Mission Innovation Challenge on clean hydrogen, where we also co-lead the activities done there. And looking beyond our transatlantic cooperation, we see new and concrete also opportunities for redesigning Europe's energy partnerships with neighboring countries and regions, notably with those supplying us with important energy sources like oil and gas, advancing supply diversification, and helping the design of stable and secure supply chains in these countries. I mean, we cannot minimize the important geopolitical impacts of what hydrogen economy will bring us.
Got it. Thank you. And I see lots of questions starting to come in through the Q&A function. So everybody, don't be shy about asking them. We will get to them very soon. But I do want to go and ask the same question to Michael. What opportunities for transatlantic cooperation do you see?
Yeah, we certainly welcome Paula's comments on US-EU and bilateral energy work. I would say currently IPHE, International Partnership for Hydrogen in the Economy, hydrogen fuel cells in the economy, really is the I think it's the place we see the activity happening across Atlantic, but also globally. So we think that is an excellent forum. There's a lot of good work being done there on safety codes and standards related to work, which may not be the sexiest thing, but are critically important at this stage when you have a budding new energy industry. And then also through the Clean Energy Ministerial as well. We've been quite committed to that. I think, importantly, the industry here, we got some big new players coming in more actively, but there's kind of a budding, let's say, small to medium-sized set of companies who have been working for a while on hydrogen. They tend to be focused in one region or the other, but have some cross or global activity. I think finding ways to work on innovation, supporting them across countries will be very important to move things forward in the next 5 years.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, private sector's perspective on this. Christian, what can transatlantic policymakers do to better coordinate their efforts around hydrogen and accelerate the adoption of hydrogen technologies?
First of all, I have to really thank Michael. I mean, I appreciate that he mentions codes and standard, because we shouldn't underestimate that's how important it is. We have to build a supply chain now. If you want to scale up and we have to get costs down, for example, for electrolyzer systems, then we need to understand how we can do it, and we want to do it on a global basis. So I think this is not to be underestimated, how much work is necessary on the regulation side. Let it be codes and standards, let it be other regulations on how to put a value to green hydrogen. And this is the second piece I just wanted to highlight. As Tom pointed out, the technology is quite old, right? I think we have technology available also. We can do a lot of things, right? But the commercial models are today not appropriately working. I mean, if you try to compete with a green hydrogen molecule against black hydrogen, you will fail in most of the cases. And there might be exceptional examples which work, but by and large, to drive the volume up, we have to do different. And I think this is where regions in terms of collaboration can really do a difference. If we understand how to value a green hydrogen molecule in the end product, let it be the steel, let it be the chemical or whatever, right? How can you put a sustainable value to this, which really pays for this difference? And this will be key to drive up volume. And at the end, we're all looking now about the one question: how can we get up volume to get the cost down? So I think it's really around these two things. And this is where, particular, this collaboration between public bodies, and it's super that Paula and Michael are here, and the industry can really create a lot of value on this interface.
Christian, thanks. And before I go to Tom, I actually want to take a follow-up on what you said and ask Paula. If Paula, do you see the proposed carbon border adjustment mechanism as a way of valuing that green hydrogen molecule? Is that something that you're talking about in your conversations?
It is obviously part of our discussions, and this is a mechanism that it was announced in the European Green Deal. So the Commission is intensively working on this. Of course, minding about WTO compliance issues and also minimizing administrative costs. The direct relation with the hydrogen is not addressed yet in the strategy, but of course is part of the equation, no doubt.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, and Tom, again, same question. What can transatlantic policymakers do to better coordinate hydrogen policy? What do you see needed from both sides of the Atlantic?
Thanks, Randy. I'll try not to be repetitive. I just do want to say, of course, safety codes and standards, fantastic. Christian talked about that. I'll leave it there, but I just want to put my tick box there. So I want to go back to this scaling up model. Christian said it's all about volume and scaling up. That's how the costs come down. That's how it gets competitive with diesel and other technologies. And that needs infrastructure. It needs R&D, subsidy and development, and it needs incentives for deployment. That's the only way the thing goes down the cost curve. Otherwise, it's always cheaper to just buy a diesel engine. And all the panelists have talked about that. So everything we can do to help on those is what makes the biggest difference. For Christian and I, we have hundreds of millions of dollars to invest every single year in R&D to make this technology viable for commercial use. That means the more volume we can get, the better. So the more that states are thinking about how do I get everything made in my country, how do I get it made exactly the way that I want it, how do I make sure that only French suppliers are used or only American suppliers, the more you lose the opportunity for Christian and I to say, hey, we'll invest $100 or $200 million and then we can sell this everywhere, just like this. Every time something is kind of locked down, like this is the perfect standard for this country or this region, that eliminates the opportunity for us to spread our R&D cost over more units. So everything that the EU and US can do to say, look, we don't care where you make it, we just need hydrogen technology made, go ahead and sell it here. That helps small companies, medium-sized companies, and large companies do the R&D they need to do. Second thing is make sure that we continue to invest in deployment, R&D, and infrastructure. And I would give great credit to the EU for the recent announcements they've made, for several of the countries to saying, here, we're coming out with big strategies to do that. I think that's exactly the kind of leadership that we need. And the same for the DOE, that for many years has been laying out a vision for where the country should move to in order to take advantage of all elements of hydrogen, storage, transportation, et cetera. Having a vision for that helps gather companies around it. So these steps by the US and EU governments have made a big difference. I'd encourage them, of course, to keep going, but I would just say for us, those steps they took had a lot to do with us making the major investments we made last year.
That's fantastic. And I think the key takeaway there is that there is a real danger in divergence on hydrogen policy. And that if we can coordinate, it actually will accelerate the deployment of technology, make all of your actions more effective, more scalable, and more efficient. And the US and the EU, possibly with other partners, are really the actors to take the lead on this. So the Atlantic Council published in late May a new report on US energy, US EU cooperation on energy security. And one of the key recommendations was the revitalization of the US EU Energy Council, or if you're in the EU, you call it the EU US Energy Council. But that's one thing where it could be a great venue for developing and harmonizing hydrogen policy. We have a great group of questions coming in from the audience around the issue that everybody has raised in one way or another on the cost of producing hydrogen, capacity to produce enough cleanly, how do you reach scale, et cetera. So we'll try to take a range of these, and I'll try to group as many together as I can. I think, here's a really interesting one that goes to the heart of cooperation before we get into sort of how we produce hydrogen. But how do we think about transatlantic hydrogen trade? So actually shipping hydrogen, is this something that people are thinking about? And if yes, what is the best form of hydrogen shipping? Ammonia, or what are the other options? And let's Christian was nodding, so I'm going to go to Christian first on this.
Thank you very much. I hope I can appropriately answer this. I think we will definitely see it, because we obviously have the situation, as I said before, that the areas where we consume energy and where we produce energy are going to fall apart. I mean, if I take Europe, for example, Europe cannot survive without energy imports. And this will obviously also apply for green hydrogen. The question in terms of what is the best way to transport is a super one, and I would love to answer this, but obviously it will also depend very much on the use case. And I think is what are we actually using this green hydrogen molecule for? I mean, ammonia, methanol will allow a lot of value chains which can produce chemicals, for example, quite easily and quite effectively. It also could then be okay in terms of power generation, but I think this is where we have to see at what point in time what carrier are going to pay out and how difficult is the amount of transport. The interesting point about transporting hydrogen in a molecule, like for example methanol or ammonia, I always find that if you look on the transport cost, I mean it's really the minority. From the top of my head, I think it's around 20% of the total landed cost then afterwards. So relatively is not minor, but it's not determining the use case as such. So I think we will see a diversity on how we transport molecules, depending on the end use case. But you definitely need cross-border trade of hydrogen. There's no way around it.
Got it. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah.
Just one.
Everybody
Go ahead,
does.
Michael.
Let's go. Tom, and then Michael, then Paula.
Sorry about that, you guys. Only a brief comment to say that today, the most common form of transportation is 350 bar vessels on the back of a diesel pickup truck. Big diesel commercial truck is the most common transportation of hydrogen today. So I think one thing has to be said is that, and Paula made the point that there is the brown hydrogen, or the whatever you want to call it, black hydrogen, is mostly what's sold today. And mostly that's what's driving fuel cells and other hydrogen uses today. And there are trucks driving around with just canisters on the back that are the things that are mostly driving fuel cells today. So we have a lot of opportunity to improve. And I just want to make sure that people know that every time we allow more trade between countries, easier to transport, easier to move, the more opportunity there is to build scale. So we just launched with Air Liquide. Air Liquide did the project, and we are supplying technology for the largest green hydrogen electrolyzer station in the world in Bécancour, Canada. So it's a 20 megawatt station. And this is only possible if we can take this hydrogen and send it other places. Otherwise, it's just too much. So I just wanted to agree with Christian, there's no question that we're going to have to trade and transport, and the more that's allowed and the more we figure out good codes, safety standards to do it, the faster the industry is going to grow.
Okay, Michael.
I was just going to chime in. IPHE currently has a task force focusing on this question of developing an analytical framework of how do you actually measure the emissions level, classify the hydrogen. You're going to start moving it internationally, right? There'll be a lot of questions around that. So there's a lot of basic work that needs to be done. The global trade in hydrogen will come, but first things first, we got to get the cost of delivered hydrogen to, if Tom's clients who are driving trucks want to use hydrogen, they got to get the cost per mile down from where it is today. So there's, I think, some short-term issues as well. I think the global big energy companies are obviously well-versed in the movement of energy on a global scale. You've certainly seen some demonstrations out in Asia and Australia on the shipping of hydrogen. All of that needs to be worked on and moved on, but we also need to get the cost of, delivered hydrogen down, because we got to remember, what's going to propel hydrogen to work or kill it to not work is if the cost, especially in transportation, if the cost per mile, the unit cost of operations doesn't come down, it's going to be a hard push. And electrification will give it a run for its money potentially.
And Paula.
Yeah, you don't hear dissenting views on this theme. Also on our side, the way we see it is that developing this a global liquid market with commodity-based hydrogen trading would facilitate the entry of new producers and also would be beneficial for the deeper integration with other energy carriers. It would also create viable price signals for investments and operational decisions, and also allow to hedge risks under long-term bilateral contracts. So definitely it would play in favor of reducing the costs and scaling up the renewable hydrogen, as we recognize in the strategy, beyond the current existing uses will definitely require transporting the hydrogen. So we really see that already inside the EU, a condition for the widespread use of clean hydrogen as an energy carrier, it will be the availability of infrastructure to connect the supply and the demand. And in our strategy, the strategy is built on a phased approach. So we're starting with very much localized production linked to consumption, and the next step, the clusters around perhaps some big consumers, and then connecting the clusters, and then and this will definitely lead to then a pan-European infrastructure and the global creation of a global liquid market. We also believe it will come.
Mm-hmm. So, Paula, you mentioned the role of hydrocarbons and essentially blue hydrogen in advancing the hydrogen economy. That also implies that we need to do a significant amount of work on carbon capture. So can you tell me about the role of carbon capture technology and the investments in carbon capture technology that need to happen alongside these investments in hydrogen technology to really get, again, the scale of hydrogen production that everyone acknowledges we need?
So as I said at the beginning, I mean, there is a very limited production of hydrogen nowadays in Europe. Let's face it, it's less than 5% of the energy mix, and is almost entirely based on fossil production. So, and in our phased approach, the starting point is try to replace this. So to pass from a brown or hydrogen to blue, and also pave the way for the green. So what is envisioned is that in a transitional phase, we'll be looking at ways to decarbonize this fossil-based hydrogen. And what is this transitional period is from now to 2024 up to 2030, where we plan renewable hydrogen to become cost competitive. There, of course, we are looking at CCS. By the way, CCS has always been in the EU energy strategy, but since the commitment to carbon neutrality by 2050, the interest on CCS came back much more strongly as the way to decarbonize some difficult industrial sectors that are important to be retained in Europe in a decarbonized economy. So definitely we'll be looking at that and mobilizing financial support, be it from our innovation fund, but also our Horizon 2020, which is our major the future research and innovation program. But of course, we at the same time, it's not the objective to end up in a situation having stranded assets, because as I said at the beginning, our objective and the focus of this strategy is really to develop the renewable-based hydrogen. So whatever is done in a transitional period where we are scaling up the renewable hydrogen cannot then result in stranded assets. So it's important to keep this in mind.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I'd love to hear your take on this question. 45Q and the U.S.'s real leadership in CCS.
Yeah, no, CCS is going to be critical for many reasons. So, I mean, it's important for hydrogen, but it's important much more broadly. So, the U.S. is definitely making significant investments, both at the R&D side as well as trying to spur the commercial side for that. There are obviously some big technical and cost challenges there. We think it can definitely be a part of the hydrogen solution, although we are also very heavily working on electrolysis, because it's not just the producing the hydrogen and having the hydrogen itself. It's also how do you manage a very high level of renewables on the grid to be able to use hydrogen as that integrated energy carrier, that ability to do time shifting. So there's a lot of, we see the co-benefits. If you think about producing hydrogen from renewables and purely just for the value of the hydrogen and without grid services, you have a lot of cost challenges. But if you can layer on grid services and that value on top of it and that value stacking, we think it really can accelerate the case for hydrogen's use, and not just in transport, but certainly in industrial sectors as well, where you then can add on, layer in another value. If you're looking at trying to decarbonize steel production, you have then another value in there. And we think that combination is what's going to propel hydrogen, and then let's say in the near term, in the next 10 years, and then you start getting to really big volume, then more things can grow.
Tom, I see you nodding your head, agreeing vigorously here. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think Michael said it well. There really isn't a good case for green hydrogen as a automotive fuel or fuel for, unless you can utilize the full benefits of hydrogen. I mean, I'm not saying you can't eventually get there, just as he said, but I think the transition drops out a lot. It takes a lot longer. If we can use the hydrogen for grid storage or other benefits, which is sort of supports the regional idea that Christian brought up earlier, I think you get there a lot sooner. And of course, in things like commercial vehicles like trucks, if the fuel cells have a big advantage over batteries because they just don't weigh as much on the vehicle, and there's a much better power density package with a fuel cell and hydrogen electric vehicle as opposed to a battery electric vehicle. If we can get the hydrogen at a reasonable cost and it can be deployed wide enough that they can use it. And I just think that Michael's concept of using the full benefits of hydrogen is really the right one to make it happen. And so I'm just supporting his view on that.
Got it. Thank you. So we have another question, slightly different topic, that on using biomass to produce hydrogen, coming from Robert Doe, and it's directed to Paula. It asks if Paula can comment regarding the EU circular economy platform as it relates to using biomass and waste to produce green hydrogen, and how the Commission might support such projects.
Circularity is one of the big objectives that we have under the European Green Deal. And when it comes to energy, and I referred in my original statement, we'll be looking at ways to reduce the losses. So everything will have to be reutilized. A classical example is the waste heat, for instance, of data centers that can be injected into the district heating networks and warm our houses. When it comes to biomass, so currently biomass is one of the most important renewable energy sources utilized in the EU. Of course, we pay huge attention to the sustainability, and the EU has set for itself a very high levels of sustainability criteria to make sure that it's respectful of our environment, of biodiversity, and of pollution levels. And provided this is the case, hydrogen production based on biomass, we can even look at it as the next step when we consider the production of blue hydrogen, that the natural gas could be ultimately replaced by biomass, and thereby even through the use of CCS get the so much wanted negative emissions that may be needed when getting to 2050 in order to secure the carbon neutrality.
Thank you.
Randy, if I can add, quick comment here. Certainly, biomass or other, let's say, waste carbon sources, municipal solid waste, liquid waste, organics, to hydrogen as a pathway. But I think if we look at the let's say the entire ecosystem, you look at things like the aviation sector, which are going to need to have liquid fuels. I think we would suggest that the primary path for a lot of those waste carbon sources, as well as sustainable biomass, is very important, as Paul says, to have a sustainable approach, is the conversion to low carbon, near zero carbon liquid fuels that certain sectors will have to have, both transitional for a long time to come, but also aviation sector. And we see there's actually tremendous progress that has been made there that maybe hasn't quite been as visible, and it's not getting the attention that hydrogen is. Hydrogen is great, but we think that biomass and waste carbon for drop-in liquid fuels also has huge opportunity.
Yeah, if you've flown out of LAX anytime in the past few years, I haven't done that this year. You might have flown on a plane that has some drop-in sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
I have a really good question from the audience that I think is would be clarifying for a lot of people out there, and actually touches on what Paula mentioned about not having any stranded assets. Unfortunately, it's a pipeline question, and we don't have anybody from Williams or SNAM on the line. But I'm hoping Christian might know the answer, or someone else. Which is, what is the possibility of using existing natural gas pipelines for transporting hydrogen? And I think it's both blend, but also ultimately 100%. How does that look? How does that work?
Yeah, I think this will be one part of the big discussion. I mean, as you may know, there is, I see particularly in Europe happening at the moment, the refurbishment of the pipeline grid to take roughly up to 20% on hydrogen as injected fuel or as injected molecule into the natural gas. And then obviously trying to understand what happens then downstream the pipeline with the different users there. But the current tests show, and we have done a test ourselves, that 20% is perfectly fine. And it works in the system with certain refurbishments, but you can largely use existing infrastructure. And this will be one key point. How can we make use really of all these invested assets which we have around? This will not be the end solution, because at the end you want to go to 100% hydrogen, which then will require bigger investments into the refurbishment of the pipeline. But anything up to 20%, which is already a huge volume, can be relatively easy retrofitted.
Yeah, I mean, how much hydrogen do you need to produce to even get to that 20% in the European gas network? I mean, it's a significant amount, right?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you from the top of my head, but I mean, if you see that, I mean, today, I mean, as Paula said, I think we have 100 million tons of hydrogen totally produced, and this is a fraction really of, I mean, if you see, let's say, one of the pipelines normally takes around, what is like a couple of, let's say, billion cubic meters per year already. So it's massive. It's multiple times of anything what you have today.
Got it. So Paula, please.
Allow me just to build on what Christian just said in relation to the transport. We see that in Europe there is room for the retrofitting of our expensive infrastructure for gas across European member states. Definitely it is cheaper than to have dedicated infrastructure for hydrogen, but we are not excluding that possibility either. I'd like to say also, linking to perhaps to the comment offered before by Michael, it's a fact that we should always go, because the cost effectiveness has to be in the back of our minds, especially when we are talking about economic recovery. And so the first thing is to look at the direct solutions. Of course, electrification, of course, renewable fuels, renewable gases. I mean, it's much more straightforward. We have less losses. It's maybe cheaper. So hydrogen, it's a very high value product. And this also has consequences when it comes to the blending. Technically, as Christian said, the 20% figure is indicated that we can go up to 20%. But we also should think carefully whether we are not mixing up something of very high level with other gases, and what is the outcome of that. So this has to be brought in mind, not only the technical limitation of the 20%, but also, is this really the use we want to give to such a high value and expensive, for now, hydrogen?
Got it. Thank you. I think that's really clarifying. Michael, did you want to jump
I
in?
was going to just, yeah, I would agree with that. We have a research program called High Blend to that point, but we later today actually will be announcing close to $60 million in new awards in things that we think are maybe a little more short term: data centers, marine use, ports, steel production. We see some of those as maybe providing more high value added use in, let's say, the next 5 years, 10 years, which really can help propel the industry.
Michael, I'm looking forward to that announcement, and everyone, you heard it here first. We have a great question coming in from Jason Bloom at Invesco, which might be a great way to wrap up, because it really points towards the future. So Invesco, obviously big investment house. Is there something that we can do as investment capital allocators that would be helpful in speeding the expansion of the hydrogen economy? So let's go to Tom first for that.
Well, as sorry to go back, but I do think, since the entire thing is about scaling, and the elements of scaling are infrastructure development and deployment, my feeling is, if investors can be given enough guidance about how the economy will be structured for hydrogen in a region, which again, I think is what Paula and Michael and the folks they're working with are trying to do. California's got a big, I think it allows and enables companies like Invesco to make investments in infrastructure. I think as long as when infrastructure is here, buy all this capital and then see how it goes, nobody wants that one. But if you understand, we're going to build this pipeline or this set of stations or this conversion technology or this electrolyzer, and here's the uses, and private sector can do most of the investment. Once the infrastructure or the vision is set out and the incentives are set in place, declining over time, I think most of the capital can come from the private sector. What the governments need to do is kind of do the initiation, the vision painting, and then the initial incentives to get people off the dime. So my view is that Invesco and organizations like it will have a role in putting investment into infrastructure that will earn recovery because of the initial incentives by government, plus then investments in conversion technologies and power technologies that will eventually produce, either electrolyze the hydrogen or do the energy storage in the grid and that kind of thing. So I do believe there are significant opportunities there. And in fact, the Hydrogen Council has produced some studies about this, about what the investment required is in order to make some of these jumps. And I highly recommend that if they haven't seen those studies, they take a look at them.
Tom, thank you. Christian.
Yeah, maybe I can. I would echo what Tom just has said, but maybe just to add. I mean, the investor is going to decide where the money flows, and with this, where decision making is being driven. And I mean, I see a lot more active movement there, and this changes something also for a big corporation with us, which used to have a relatively big conventional technology fleet. We are changing our portfolio constantly because our investors ask us to do so. So by steering your investment money, obviously you do a change in terms of where companies are going into. And if you support the long-term ideas as investors, then you can help also us as private corporations really to do these bold moves, because some of it are bold moves. We are leaving, I think Tom and myself, we are leaving let's say, very well-known ground with established technologies, which are there for more than 100 years. And now we're moving into something new and spend an awful lot of money and taking an awful lot of risk, right? So in this regard, I think we as an investment community also have to see that we want this move to happening, supporting sustainable moves. And then I think in this regard, investment companies play an enormous role of changing the society.
I'll add one last piece. I think investment abhors risk, and it runs from risk. So I think if investment groups can help, let's say, government agencies understand what are the risks they see, or what are tools or mechanisms or neutral analytical methods we could develop that help reduce that risk or basically quantify the risk, more importantly, then I think that often will spur investment in these types of on the cusp technologies.
Right.
Paula, final word?
Yes, thank you. Just building on what we just heard, I think the important is really that investors need to get the direction, the long-term vision. This is what the Commission tried to do with this strategy, and this is why we put on the table now. They need enabling regulatory framework. And this strategy is the beginning for us of a process of revision of certain important legal texts that will definitely help make room for to trigger the demand and the supply for hydrogen. And of course, financial support is necessary. Of course, I mean, these investments have to be private. We cannot be putting a lot of public money here, but just enough to trigger and to make up for the additional risk that still prevails and the additional costs that the renewable hydrogen represent today. So all in all, I mean, we have high expectations also in terms of the Alliance of Cleaner Hydrogen that was launched also earlier this month to help industry together with member states and ourselves to get this strong pipeline of projects to hit the roads and be developed. So again, I think it's as a joint effort from public authorities, governments, and the private sector. Absolutely.
Paula, thank you. Everyone, we are unfortunately out of time. I know we have a list of questions in the Q&A, and I have a list of questions myself. We could probably go on for another hour, but we must stop. Thank you all for joining us for this remarkable conversation, this really timely conversation. And thank you to our panelists for being here and sharing their perspectives. I'd also like to thank Zach Strauss, Laura Macedo, Roger Morales, David Yellen, and the Hydrogen Council team, including Ivana Jemelkova, Ciel Jolie, and Anais Laporte. If you would like to rewatch today's event or share it with a colleague, you can find a replay on the Atlantic Council website and YouTube channel. It should be available very, very soon after we sign off. If you're interested in other upcoming events, please check out the Atlantic Council website for more information. We have a program on Wednesday morning on green stimulus and the energy transition, which I think will also be quite relevant. So please tune into that and please check us out for more information. Until next time, thank you again for joining us. And again, thank you, panelists. This was really remarkable. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.